The first report described it as a malfunction, a heating anomaly, perhaps, a fault in the ventilation system of the research facility, or a pocket of trapped air behaving strangely inside an unfinished underground level. The technicians who logged the initial readings assumed the data would correct itself once the instruments were recalibrated. Temperature gradients that sharp did not occur naturally indoors, not without barriers, walls, insulation, something to separate one space from another. But there were no walls. The anomaly existed in the center of a concrete chamber roughly the size of a gymnasium, part of a decommissioned civil defense complex built during the Cold War and later repurposed for geological and atmospheric experiments. The chamber was empty except for sensors, cables, and floor markings left behind by previous projects. No furniture, no partitions, no elevation changes. And yet, in the middle of that open space, the air formed a room. Investigators would later describe it as a perfect square, approximately 4 meters on each side, oriented precisely along the cardinal directions. Inside that square, the temperature dropped abruptly by nearly 12 degrees Celsius. Outside it, the air remained stable and unremarkable. The transition was instantaneous. Step forward, and the cold wrapped around you like a sealed container. Step back, and it vanished. No gradual shift, no mixing, as if you had crossed a threshold. At first, the discovery was treated as an engineering puzzle. Thermal cameras confirmed the shape. Infrared imaging showed crisp edges, unnaturally straight, hovering in space. Smoke tests revealed that air currents bent around the boundary, sliding along it instead of passing through. When fog was released into the chamber, it parted cleanly at the invisible edges, leaving a hollow square of clear air suspended within the haze. That was when the psychological effects began. The first person to enter the space deliberately was a junior technician named Harville. He stepped forward confidently, holding a tablet and narrating his observations aloud. The moment he crossed the boundary, his voice faltered. 2 seconds later, he dropped the tablet. Within 5 seconds, he was shouting, wordless, panicked, backing away with his hands raised as if pressed against glass. When he emerged, he collapsed to his knees. Later, when questioned, Harville struggled to describe what he felt. He denied seeing anything unusual. There were no hallucinations, no voices, no visual distortions. Instead, he described an overwhelming certainty that he was not allowed to be there. Not fear, exactly. More like trespass, an instinctive conviction that he had violated a rule so absolute it predated thought. I knew, he said, that if I stayed, something would notice. Medical tests showed elevated cortisol levels consistent with acute panic, but no neurological abnormalities. He had not been touched. Nothing had chased him. Yet his hands trembled for hours afterward, and he refused to enter the chamber again. Others followed. Every subject experienced the same reaction within seconds of crossing the boundary. Some froze in place, unable to move forward or back. Others fled immediately. One researcher vomited. Another fainted. A third burst into tears without understanding why. The response was universal and reproducible, regardless of personality, training, or prior knowledge of the phenomenon. Importantly, the reaction only occurred inside the square. Standing centimeters from the boundary produced nothing. Reaching an arm through it triggered discomfort, but not panic. Full body entry was required, as if the space needed to recognize you as inside before responding. Instruments, unlike people, showed no distress. Robotic probes passed in and out without incident. Temperature sensors functioned normally. Pressure remained constant. Radiation levels were unchanged. Sound waves behaved oddly. Microphones placed inside the square recorded an absence of ambient noise, as though the room swallowed echoes, but this alone did not explain the human response. Then someone tried to mark it. Researchers attempted to outline the square using tape on the floor. The tape refused to stay aligned. Adhesive peeled. Chalk marks smudged overnight despite the sealed environment. Laser projections held for a few seconds before drifting off target, as if refracted by an invisible surface. No physical marker could be made to coincide perfectly with the boundary for more than a brief moment. The room resisted being drawn. The phrase locked room first appeared in an internal memo after a senior investigator remarked that the space behaved like a sealed chamber, one that enforced its closure not through walls, but through reaction. You could enter, technically. Nothing stopped your body, but something stopped you. Further tests revealed additional precision. The square's dimensions never varied. Over weeks of monitoring, It neither expanded nor contracted. Temperature inside fluctuated slightly with ambient conditions, but the boundary remained exact to the millimeter. When the facility experienced a minor seismic tremor, cracks formed in the concrete floor around the chamber, but the square did not shift. It stayed where it was, indifferent to the building that contained it. Psychologists brought in to evaluate the phenomenon proposed that the panic response might be an evolved instinct triggered by subtle environmental cues, perhaps infrasound, electromagnetic fields, or changes in air ionization. Yet repeated measurements found nothing outside normal ranges. No signal could be identified that explained the uniformity or intensity of the reaction. More troubling was the consistency of the subjective reports. Test subjects, interviewed separately, used remarkably similar language. They spoke of being watched, of standing in the wrong place, of a rule they had broken without knowing it existed. Several independently described the sensation of edges, even with eyes closed, an awareness of the square's limits that did not rely on sight or touch. One researcher phrased it more starkly: it felt like the room already had something inside it. And that thing did not include me. The decision was made to conduct a prolonged exposure test using sedation. A volunteer was anesthetized and gently moved into the square, supported by a harness. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Vital signs remained stable. Then, without waking, the volunteer's heart rate spiked. Muscles tensed violently. EEG readings showed sudden, chaotic activity, as if the brain were attempting to rouse itself from deep sleep. The subject was removed immediately. Upon waking, the volunteer had no memory of the event, but reported an intense, lingering dread that lasted for days. He requested to be transferred off the project. At this point, the language of science began to fray. Reports grew cautious, then vague. Funding reviews questioned the value of continuing. No practical application could be identified. The phenomenon could not be weaponized, harnessed, or explained. It simply existed, an invisible, sealed space that rejected human presence without exerting force. Before the project was shut down, one final test was performed. An autonomous system was programmed to remain inside the square for an extended period, monitoring conditions continuously. It stayed for 72 hours. During that time, data streams showed increasing irregularities. Time stamps drifted out of sync with external clocks. Internal temperature readings lagged behind real-time changes by fractions of a second, then by whole seconds, then minutes. The system did not fail, but it no longer agreed with the world outside. When the unit was retrieved, its internal clock was exactly 4 minutes behind. No explanation was recorded. The chamber was sealed shortly afterward. Officially, the site was deemed unsafe due to unresolved environmental instability. The square remains where it was, now enclosed by concrete and warning signs that say nothing about what lies beneath. Those who worked on the project rarely speak about it. When they do, they emphasize what the space did not do. It did not harm anyone. It did not trap anyone. It did not change shape or pursue intrusion. It simply enforced a boundary. A room with no walls. A door that never closed, because it never needed to. Whatever defined that square did not rely on matter. It relied on recognition. The moment a person crossed into it, something fundamental responded, not with violence, but with certainty. You do not belong here. And that, perhaps, is what made it feel locked. Have you ever heard of the Isha tablets? It's one of those stories that blurs the line between ancient history, mythology, and maybe even a little bit of science fiction. It's a tale that has been whispered about for decades, captivating researchers, conspiracy theorists, and anyone who loves a good mystery. So, what exactly are these alleged tablets, and what secrets are they said to hold? Let's dive deep into this fascinating enigma. Our story begins in the 1930s with a man named William Dudley Pelley. Pelley was a writer, a spiritualist, and a pretty controversial figure in his time. He claimed to have had a profound out-of-body experience in 1928, during which he traveled to higher spiritual realms. According to Pelley, it was during this mystical journey that he was given access to a vast cosmic history, a history recorded on what he called the Isha tablets. He described them not as physical objects you could hold, but as indestructible, etheric records of all events that have ever happened in our universe. Think of it like a cosmic cloud server, holding the data of all creation. So, what incredible information did these tablets supposedly contain? Pelley wrote extensively about what he learned. He claimed the tablets told the story of human origins, but it was far different from what we learn in school. According to his accounts, humanity didn't just evolve on Earth. Instead, our souls are ancient, cosmic travelers, originating from distant star systems. These souls, he said, came to Earth as part of a grand spiritual education, a school for souls to learn lessons of love, struggle, and growth. The Isha tablet story gets even more detailed. It describes a vast cosmic hierarchy of beings, from divine entities down to developing souls like ours. It talks about great cosmic cycles, galactic wars fought between forces of light and darkness, and the rise and fall of civilizations across the universe, long before Earth was even formed. He even brought in concepts that sound strangely modern, talking about different dimensions, vibrational frequencies, and the spiritual evolution of entire galaxies. One of the most captivating parts of the Isha tablet's narrative is its explanation for lost civilizations here on Earth, like Atlantis and Lemuria. Pelley's version, drawn from these etheric records, claimed that these weren't just mythical places, but real, advanced societies founded by beings with deep cosmic knowledge. They possess technologies and spiritual abilities we can barely imagine today. Their downfall, according to the tablets, was a result of a cosmic struggle, a battle between spiritual principles that played out right here on our planet. Now, it's crucial to point out that there's no physical proof of the Isha tablets. No archaeologist has ever dug them up. Pelley himself said they weren't physical. This is where the story splits into two camps. For skeptics, the Isha tablets are nothing more than the product of a very active imagination. They see it as a fascinating piece of fiction, a modern myth created by Pelley to support his spiritual and political beliefs. And let's be clear, some of Pelley's other views were highly controversial and have been widely condemned, which makes it easy for many to dismiss his spiritual claims entirely. But for believers and those open to metaphysical possibilities, the story is far from over. They argue that proof doesn't always have to be physical. They point to the concept of the Akashic records, a similar idea found in Eastern philosophies, which is described as a compendium of all universal events, thoughts, and emotions encoded in a non-physical plane of existence. Could Pelley's Isha tablets be his personal interpretation of the Akashic records? Was he, in his own unique way, tapping into a universal field of information that mystics and seers have described for centuries? The ideas presented in the Isha tablets narrative have had a surprising amount of influence, especially within New Age and esoteric circles. Concepts like star seeds, the idea that many human souls originated from other star systems like the Pleiades or Sirius, are incredibly popular today. You'll find these ideas woven into spiritual teachings, books, and online communities all over the world. Many people feel a deep, intuitive connection to this idea of having a cosmic origin, a feeling of not being entirely from here. Whether it's true or not, the story of the Isha tablets provides a powerful framework for that feeling. The narrative also talks about Earth's special role in the galaxy. It's not just some random planet. In this cosmic story, Earth is a critical stage, a place where major spiritual dramas unfold. It's a library of genetic and biological diversity, and a place where souls from all over the universe come to experience life in physical form. This idea elevates our planet and our own existence, suggesting we are all part of something much grander and more meaningful than we might realize on a day-to-day basis. So, how do we make sense of the Isha tablets? Are they a real, non-physical record of cosmic history? Are they a modern myth created by a controversial figure? Or are they a metaphor for a deeper truth about our spiritual nature and our connection to the universe? Perhaps the real value of the Isha tablet story isn't in proving whether they are real or not. Maybe its power lies in the questions it forces us to ask. Where do we come from? Why are we here? What is our connection to the vast universe that surrounds us? These are the same questions that have driven humanity's greatest philosophical and scientific achievements. The story, whether you see it as fact or fiction, encourages us to look up at the stars and wonder about our place among them. It challenges the purely materialistic view of existence and invites us to consider that reality might be far stranger, more complex, and more magical than we think. In the end, the Isha tablets remain a true enigma, a story passed down, reinterpreted, and debated for nearly a century. It is a testament to our enduring fascination with the unknown and our deep-seated need to understand our origins and our destiny. It's a cosmic mystery that continues to inspire and provoke, reminding us that there might just be more to our world than meets the eye. What do you think? Are the Isha tablets a fascinating piece of modern folklore, or could they be a glimpse into a hidden cosmic history? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries. See you next time.
In the orderly world of bureaucracy, time is supposed to move in only one direction. Dates advance, ages increase, ink dries, records settle, and the past stays politely behind the present. This is why archivists across 3 countries were unsettled when they encountered the same anomaly, repeated with quiet consistency across nearly a century of documents. A man who appeared to grow younger the longer he lived. At first glance, it looked like a clerical error, an ink slip, a mistranscribed number, the sort of thing that happens when census takers work by candlelight and memory. But as the documents accumulated, as birth certificates, tax rolls, marriage licenses, military exemptions, and death records all began to align, the explanation of mistake collapsed under its own weight. Every independent source agreed, every official seal confirmed it. On paper, at least, the man aged backward. The earliest document was a baptismal record from 1813, found in a parish archive in what is now eastern France. The handwriting was neat, the Latin formula standard. It recorded the birth of a boy named Etienne Merritt, born to a cooper and his wife in a riverside village. The priest noted the date, the witnesses, and the infant's apparent health. Nothing about the entry stood out until it was compared to what came later. The next appearance of Etienne occurred in an 1834 census. Listed as a farm laborer residing in the same region, he was recorded as being 18 years old. By ordinary arithmetic, he should have been 21. Census errors were common, especially among rural populations, and no one at the time would have questioned a discrepancy of 3 years. Etienne himself may have supplied the information, or a neighbor may have guessed. The record was accepted and filed away, but the pattern did not correct itself. In 1848, Etienne appeared again, this time in a tax register. His age was listed as 30. By then, according to his baptism, he should have been 35. The gap had widened, 5 years missing. Still, nothing that could not be explained away by faulty memory or bureaucratic laziness. It was not until the 1861 national census that the anomaly began to feel deliberate. Etienne was recorded as 42 years old. Based on his birth record, he should have been 48. The 6-year difference matched the growing trend. Every appearance shaved time away from him, as if age itself were being quietly edited out. What made the case stranger was that everything else about the records was impeccable. His address changed in ways that matched known migration patterns. His occupation shifted logically with age and economic conditions. His tax contributions rose and fell with documented harvest yields. Even his signature, preserved on several legal documents, evolved naturally, letters tightening, strokes growing more confident, then looser again. The man, at least in ink, was real. In 1870, Etienne married. The marriage certificate survives in full, signed by both parties and 3 witnesses. His bride, Marie Lefevre, was listed as 22. Etienne's age was given as 46. According to the baptismal record, he should have been 57. The discrepancy had grown to 11 years, yet no objections were raised. The officiating magistrate signed without comment. The witnesses, the laborers, and Marie's uncle affirmed the information. Marie herself signed her name directly beneath the line stating her husband's age. If she noticed anything unusual, she never said so publicly. The couple had no recorded children. Parish birth registers list several Merritt households during that period, but none are directly tied to Etienne and Marie. What does appear, however, are a series of residence permits and travel passes issued in the 1880s. These documents list Etienne's age in his late 30s. By then, according to his original birth record, he should have been nearing 70. One particularly striking document from 1887 records Etienne as 39 years old. The clerk's handwriting is clear, the paper bears an official watermark. The ink composition matches others from the same office. There is no sign of alteration or overwriting. To any contemporary reader, the document is unremarkable. Only when compared against the baptismal record does it become impossible. The archivist who first noticed the pattern in the early 2000s initially assumed fraud. Identity theft, though rare in the 19th century, was not unheard of. Perhaps a son or nephew had assumed Etienne's name. Perhaps two men had been conflated, but deeper examination ruled this out. Physical descriptions, height, hair color, scars remain consistent across decades. A distinctive injury to Etienne's left hand, noted in a military exemption record, appeared again in a factory employment ledger 40 years later. It was the same man, continuously documented. Marie died in 1893. Her death certificate lists her age as 45, consistent with her birth record. Etienne is named as her widower, age 34. At the time of her burial, he should have been 80. Witnesses at the funeral, according to parish notes, described him as reserved and quietly spoken. One line, added almost as an afterthought, notes that he appeared uncommonly youthful for a man of his station. The phrase was not emphasized. It did not seem important, only later would it feel like a clue overlooked. By the turn of the century, Etienne had moved again, this time to a growing industrial town. Factory employment records from 1901 list him as 28 years old. His job required physical stamina, and supervisors noted his reliability and strength. One marginal comment, written by a foreman, states simply, claims prior experience older than he appears. No explanation was offered. The final document in the chain is a death record dated 1909. It was issued by a municipal office whose archives survived to wars and multiple relocations. The paper is worn but legible. The cause of death is listed as unknown. No physician is named. There is no mention of illness or injury. Underage at death, the clerk wrote, -1, -1. There is no correction, no strike-through, no marginal note explaining the absurdity. The document was filed, stamped, and indexed like any other. Etienne Merritt was buried in a communal grave. There is no headstone bearing his name. When historians attempted to reconcile the record, they encountered an additional absence. Etienne's name does not appear in the cemetery registry for that year. The ledger skips from the entry above to the one below, as if he had been intentionally omitted. Marie's grave, meanwhile, remains clearly marked. Attempts to locate personal correspondence have failed. No letters, journals, or diaries attributed to Etienne have surfaced. It is as though he existed only within official systems visible to the state, but invisible to personal memory. Even property records show no lasting ownership. He rented, he moved, he left little behind. Some scholars have suggested a prosaic explanation, a bureaucratic cascade of errors, each new document copying the last without reference to the original birth record. But this theory fails to explain why the age continued to decrease rather than remain static. Others propose deliberate falsification by Etienne himself, perhaps to secure work or avoid obligations. Yet such deception would have required remarkable consistency across offices, regions, and decades, many of which operated independently and required supporting documentation. A smaller, quieter group of researchers have noted something more unsettling. In several documents, particularly those from later years, Etienne's handwriting appears steadier than in earlier ones. Where age typically introduces tremor and hesitation, his pen strokes grow simpler, cleaner, almost childlike. And then there is the negative age. Clerks were trained to leave fields blank if information was unknown. Writing, one, served no administrative purpose. It conveyed nothing useful. It was not a convention of the time. Someone chose to write it. When asked why, the archivist who rediscovered the record admitted he had no answer. It's as if, he said, the system didn't know how else to describe him. Today, Etienne Merritt exists only as a trail of paper that contradicts itself. On ink and parchment, he moved against time's current, growing younger as years passed, slipping backward toward something unrecorded and undefined. Whether this reflects an extraordinary biological anomaly, an elaborate social fiction, or something that resists explanation altogether remains unresolved. What is certain is this: when the final record was written, the man had become something the language of age could no longer contain. And so the clerk did the only thing left. He counted backward and went beyond zero.
The drought did not arrive with drama. There were no cracked fields or panicked proclamations at first, just a summer that lingered too long without rain. The lake shrank by inches, then by feet. Fishermen complained about exposed rocks tearing their nets. Children noticed that familiar swimming spots had grown shallow enough to wade across. Old men, who had watched the lake for decades, said little and began avoiding the shoreline. By early autumn, the waterline had retreated farther than anyone living could remember. That was when the stone appeared. At first, it was mistaken for a natural outcrop and odd ridge of rock revealed by the falling water. But its angles were wrong, too straight, too deliberate. As the lake continued to recede, more of it emerged. A wall, then another, meeting at a corner that no geological process could produce. Within days, the shape became undeniable. A chapel stood in the middle of the lake bed. It was small, built of pale stone darkened by age, with a simple bell tower rising above a pitched roof. A cross crowned the tower, weathered but unbroken. The structure did not look like a ruin clawed up from the depths. It looked complete, whole, waiting. People gathered at the shore in uneasy silence. No one celebrated. No one waited out immediately. The appearance of old buildings was not unknown in Europe. Reservoirs had swallowed villages before, but this lake had no such history. There were no records of a dam, no stories of forced evacuations, no maps showing a settlement beneath the water. The lake, according to every document that survived, had always been a lake. Authorities arrived with the calm confidence of explanation. A submerged church, they suggested. An abandoned structure flooded long ago. An artifact of progress or disaster misremembered by time. These things happened. The locals did not argue. They simply said the lake was never meant to be drained. When the water fell low enough to reach the chapel's door, a small team entered to assess its condition. They expected rot, mold, collapsed wood. What they found instead forced them to stop at the threshold. The air inside was dry. Not dry in the sense of less wet than expected, but dry in the way unused stone rooms are dry, cool, still, faintly dusty. Their footsteps echoed sharply against the floor. Dust stirred where no dust should have survived centuries underwater. Rows of pews filled the nave, their wood dark with age but straight, unwarped, untouched by water damage. Candles stood in iron holders along the walls. Some were whole. Others had been burned halfway down, their wax frozen in smooth drips that suggested steady flames, not exposure to water or heat extremes. Hymn books sat in racks behind the pews. They opened easily. Pages did not stick. Ink had not bled. Leather bindings were intact, supple enough to flex without cracking. There were no tide marks, no water lines, no smell of mildew. It was as though the lake had flowed around the chapel rather than through it. Engineers tested the walls for moisture. None was found. They examined the stone for sealants or coatings. Nothing unusual appeared. No lining, no barrier, no modern intervention. The chapel was simply untouched. News spread quickly, and with it came unease. Visitors described an odd sense of displacement inside the building. The space felt larger than it should have been, deeper than its dimensions allowed. Some people said time behaved strangely there, that minutes passed too quickly or not at all. Watches disagreed with one another. Phones lost signal the moment they crossed the threshold. Photographs taken inside the chapel were consistently disappointing. Images came out dim, flattened, lacking depth, as if the light had been absorbed before it could reflect properly. In several photos, candles appeared blurred even when the camera was steady. Locals stopped entering entirely. When pressed for explanations, they shared fragments of old habits rather than stories. Their grandparents had warned them not to fish the lake's center. Children were told never to drop markers or anchors there. And in dry years, rare as they were, people were advised not to wish for the water to fall any further. "The lake covers what should not be disturbed," one woman said. "That is all we were ever told." Clergy were invited to examine the chapel. Some declined outright. Others went privately and spoke little afterward. One priest emerged pale and shaken, refusing to answer questions. When asked whether the chapel could be reconsecrated, he replied only, "It was never deconsecrated." Inside, more unsettling details came to light. Several candles showed signs of having been lit at different times. Wick ash varied in age. Wax strips overlapped one another, suggesting repeated use across long intervals rather than a single moment. On the altar lay a folded cloth, clean and unfrayed. Beneath it stood a chalice, free of tarnish, as if polished regularly. Yet no one admitted to maintaining the space. The hymn books told a stranger story. Many contained handwritten notes in margins, prayers, names, dates. Some names belonged to families still living near the lake. Others had not appeared in records for centuries. In several books, the same names appeared repeatedly, written in different hands, using inks of different composition. Carbon dating only deepened the confusion. Wood from the pews dated to 1 century, the hymn books to another, the altar cloth to yet another. The candle's wax contained traces from multiple eras. Nothing aligned cleanly. The chapel's contents appeared to belong to overlapping timelines, layered rather than sequential. One book, near the back of the nave, contained a date written neatly on its final page. It had not yet occurred. At first, officials assumed it was a hoax, but laboratory analysis showed the ink had aged consistently with the rest of the book. There was no modern contamination, no evidence of recent writing. The date remained unexplained and deeply unsettling. As interest grew, proposals were made to fully drain the lake. Archaeologists argued that the chapel represented a unique opportunity to study a perfectly preserved submerged structure. Engineers drafted plans to redirect remaining water temporarily. Funding was discussed. Timelines were set. The locals objected not with protests or petitions, but with quiet refusal. They declined to assist. They withheld knowledge of the lakebed. They repeated the same warning again and again. It is not meant to be uncovered all at once. They spoke of the lake not as a barrier, but as a boundary. Not a prison, but a covering. One elderly man recalled his grandmother saying the chapel was where prayers wait when no one is ready to finish them. He admitted he had never understood what that meant and did not want to. Before any major action could be taken, the weather changed. Rain arrived suddenly, violently, after months of nothing. Storms followed one another without pause. Streams swelled. The lake refilled at a rate engineers said should not have been possible. Within days, water reached the chapel's threshold. Within weeks, it swallowed the walls. Soon, only the bell tower remained visible, rising like a warning from the surface. Then it too disappeared. Soon, only the bell tower remained visible, rising like a warning from the surface. Then it too disappeared. When officials returned with boats and diving teams, guided by precise coordinates, they found nothing. Sonar scans revealed only smooth sediment and natural contours. No stone walls. No voids. No hint of architecture beneath the lakebed. It was as if the chapel had never existed. Except for the items removed before the water returned. The hymn books, candles, and altar cloth were stored in a regional archive. At first, they remained stable. Then, slowly, they began to change. Pages yellowed rapidly. Wax cracked and crumbled. Cloth frayed along edges that had once been pristine. Conservation efforts failed, not slowed the decay, but accelerated it. One by one, the objects seemed to age all at once, collapsing under centuries that had been held at bay. Before the last hymn book disintegrated, an archivist noticed something peculiar. Pages pressed together left faint impressions behind mirrored shapes that resembled text when viewed at an angle, but vanished when looked at directly. She described it as writing that refuses to be read twice. The items were eventually sealed away, then quietly disposed of. No museum claimed them. No institution wished to display artifacts that unraveled under observation. No institution wished to display artifacts that unraveled under observation. The lake remains as it always has. On calm days, locals say the water looks unnaturally still at its center, as if reflecting not the sky above but something deeper. Fishermen avoid that area. Children are warned not to swim there. During drought years, when the shoreline pulls back just enough, some claim to see straight lines beneath the surface. Not walls, not ruins. Just the suggestion of a floor dot waiting. It was meant to keep something unfinished out of reach.
The harbor pilot noticed something wrong before the ship even crossed the breakwater. At first, it was subtle. The cargo vessel approached on a steady heading, engines humming at a low, controlled output. Her navigation lights were on. Her hull showed no visible damage. She rode the water evenly, not listing, not riding too low. Everything about her suggested competence, routine, even. Except no one answered the radio. The pilot hailed the vessel once, then again, using standard channels and emergency frequencies. Silence. No static. No interruption. Just an open channel and nothing on the other end. That alone was unusual, but not unheard of. Equipment failed. Crews got distracted. Ships missed calls. Still, the pilot felt it in his gut. Ships that drifted into port without answering usually showed signs of trouble. This one did not. The vessel crossed into the harbor under its own power, engines adjusting automatically as if following instructions. Docking thrusters activated at the correct moment. Lines were not thrown, but the ship slowed and nudged the pier with practiced precision, fenders kissing concrete exactly where they should. It docked itself. Port authorities boarded within minutes, expecting anything from a medical emergency to a mutiny. What they found instead defied every protocol designed to handle crisis at sea. The ship was empty. Not abandoned in the way derelicts are abandoned. Not stripped or damaged. Empty in the sense that a room is empty moments after someone leaves it. Still warm, still holding shape. The bridge lights were on. Radar spun. Screens glowed with active data. A half-filled mug of coffee sat beside the captain's chair, steam still faintly rising. A navigation officer's headset lay on the console, one earpiece twisted as though removed mid-sentence. The ship's logbook lay open. The last entry did not end at the bottom of a page. It ended mid-word. Visibility stable. No anomalies observed. Crew morale remains. The sentence stopped there. No punctuation. No signature. They searched the ship methodically. Crew quarters. Engine room. Galley. Cargo holds. Bathrooms. Storage lockers. Emergency stations. Lifeboats. Nothing. No bodies. No blood. No signs of struggle. No indication that anyone had left in haste, or at all. In the galley, food sat on plates. Bread had been sliced. Soup still radiated warmth from a stove left on low heat. A knife rested beside a cutting board, not dropped, not abandoned, but placed as if its user intended to return in seconds. In the engine room, the machinery ran smoothly. Maintenance logs showed no issues. Fuel levels were normal. Automated systems were engaged, but those systems required human oversight to activate in the first place. Someone had been there, very recently, and then they weren't. The first official theory was evacuation. Perhaps a gas leak, a fire, or some unseen threat had forced the crew to abandon ship. But lifeboats were still secured. Immersion suits hung neatly on their racks. Emergency alarms had not been triggered. No mayday or distress call had been sent, not even an incomplete one. Maritime law is clear on one point. Crews do not vanish silently. Someone always calls. Someone always panics. Someone always leaves a trace. This crew left nothing. Investigators reviewed the ship's black box. Audio recordings from the bridge were intact until the final moments. Voices could be heard. Routine conversation, procedural confirmations, nothing unusual. Then, without warning, the voices stopped. Not cut off. Not drowned by noise. They simply ceased. The microphones continued recording ambient sound. The hum of engines. The soft click of relays. Footsteps were notably absent. It was as if sound itself had decided no one was present anymore. Even more unsettling was the ship's course. After the last recorded voice, the vessel maintained speed and heading with uncanny precision. Minor adjustments were made, too complex for simple autopilot drift, yet no commands were logged. The ship corrected for wind and current as though guided by invisible hands. When asked how the ship had navigated the final miles into harbor, one systems engineer said quietly, "It behaved like it still had a crew." Medical examinations of the food confirmed it had been prepared less than an hour before docking. Coffee temperatures suggested minutes. One pot of stew would have burned had it been left unattended longer than that. It hadn't, which raised the most troubling question of all. Where did the crew go? There were 23 people on board, according to the manifest. Men and women with documented identities, families, histories. Their belongings remained in their cabins, phones charging, books marked mid-chapter, clothes folded. Passports were locked in safes. Wallets lay on desks. People do not abandon their identities voluntarily. Psychological explanations were floated and discarded. Mass hysteria does not produce coordinated disappearance without chaos. Hallucinations do not cook food. Sleepwalking does not remove 23 people from a steel vessel without leaving a single mark. Then came the testimonies. A dock worker assigned to secure the vessel reported feeling watched while on deck. Not threatened, observed. He said it felt like standing in a room just vacated by people who had stepped into the walls instead of through doors. Another worker complained of pressure headaches and sudden fatigue. He quit the job 2 days later and refused to return to the harbour. One investigator, reviewing the crew logs late at night, noticed something no one else had mentioned. The handwriting in the final entries subtly changed. Not dramatically, still recognizably the same person, but tighter, more compressed, as if the writer had been running out of space long before the page ended. Timestamps on digital systems showed minor inconsistencies. Nothing provable. Seconds missing here and there. Clock drift beyond expected tolerance. Small errors. Accumulating. Theories turned speculative. A classified military test gone wrong. An environmental phenomenon. A neurological agent affecting perception and memory. None explained the silence. None explained the absence of even a single shoe, a smear, a fingerprint out of place. Most disturbing was the final camera footage recovered from the bridge. The cameras did not fail. They recorded continuously. At 3:17, the crew is visible. Moving. Speaking. Alive. At 3:18, the bridge is empty. Not gradually. Not person by person. Empty in a single frame. No blur. No motion artifact. No visible transition. One moment, people. The next, none. The ship continued on. Authorities quietly sealed the vessel. Cargo was transferred. The ship was scrubbed, inspected, and eventually returned to service under a different name. Official reports cited unexplained abandonment and insufficient evidence for further action. Families received compensation. No remains were ever recovered. No funerals were held. Unofficially, the ship gained a reputation. Crew members assigned to it afterward reported unease. A sense of being crowded in empty spaces. The sound of footsteps where none should be. Doors found unlocked that had been secured minutes earlier. One sailor resigned after claiming he heard voices over the intercom. Faint, overlapping, as though many people were trying to speak at once through a single mouth. The ship was retired within 5 years. Today, maritime law courses still reference the incident, stripped of detail, reduced to a case study in anomaly. The files remain classified. The black box audio is sealed. But among those who boarded her first, one memory persists. The warmth. Ships go cold quickly when abandoned. Metal loses heat. Food cools. The air turns stale. This ship had arrived warm, as if the crew had not left it, as if they had been removed. And somewhere, between open water and safe harbor, something else had taken their place, long enough to bring the ship home, then left it empty. The grave was uncovered at the worst possible time of day. Archaeologists prefer the clean honesty of morning light, when angles are predictable and shadows behave. Sunset complicates everything. Colors distort. Depth becomes deceptive. Peripheral vision lies. Yet deadlines rarely respect superstition, and on that evening, late summer, sky already turning amber, the excavation continued. It was meant to be routine. The burial lay on the outskirts of a former settlement, exposed during preliminary surveys for a development project. Ground-penetrating radar had shown a single human interment, shallow and unremarkable. No mass grave. No anomaly. Just one skeleton, aligned according to local burial customs from the late medieval period. The team expected to document, remove, and move on. Instead, the grave ended the work entirely. When the final layer of soil was brushed away, the skeleton emerged intact, skull tilted slightly left, arms crossed, legs extended. Teeth worn. Bones slender. Nothing immediately unusual. One of the junior archaeologists called out measurements while another logged orientation and condition. Then someone noticed the shadows. As the sun dropped toward the horizon, the skeleton cast a long, sharp silhouette across the excavation wall. That alone was unremarkable. But beside it, slightly offset, fainter, but undeniably present, was a second shadow. Two shadows. One body. At first, the explanation seemed obvious. Uneven trench walls, stray equipment, and optical overlap. The team adjusted their positions. Tools were removed. Buckets lifted out of the pit. The second shadow remained. It did not behave like a trick of light. As the sun continued to sink, the primary shadow lengthened predictably. The second did not mirror it. It lagged behind by a fraction of a second, skewed at a subtly different angle, as though cast by something standing just out of alignment with the skeleton itself. Witnesses later struggled to describe what they saw without sounding foolish. They were trained professionals, accustomed to pareidolia and fatigue. But several independent accounts agree on certain details. The second shadow appeared attached, but not anchored, to the bones. It wavered when no one moved, and it did not correspond to any physical obstruction. One of the archaeologists stepped into the pit to test perspective. As she moved, both shadows shifted, but not together. The main shadow responded instantly to her movement. The second dragged, then snapped back into place, like an afterimage correcting itself. That was when the physical symptoms began. The first complaint was nausea, then dizziness, a sudden sense of pressure behind the eyes. One witness described it as standing too close to a large engine, though nothing vibrated. Another said the air felt tilted, as if balance itself had been nudged off-center. The team retreated from the pit. From the edge, they watched the shadows deepen as the light thinned. The second shadow grew darker rather than fainter, gaining definition as the sun dropped lower. It did not resolve into a recognizable shape, but its outline suggested depth, thicker, somehow, than a normal shadow should be. Someone suggested photographing it. The images, later reviewed, show only one shadow. Every photograph taken that evening, by phone, by camera, by drone, records a single silhouette. No distortion. No doubling. The second shadow exists only in eyewitness accounts. That discrepancy would later become central to the decision to halt the excavation. As sunset deepened into twilight, the vertigo worsened. One team member vomited. Another reported a sudden ringing in the ears, low and sustained. The site supervisor made the call to stop work for the evening, citing heat exhaustion and poor light conditions. They covered the grave. That should have ended the matter. It did not. That night, several team members reported unusual dreams. Not nightmares in the conventional sense, no monsters, no violence, but dreams of standing in two places at once, of casting shadows that moved independently, of being watched from an angle that made no spatial sense. One archaeologist wrote in her field journal that she woke with the certainty that she had been buried incorrectly. The following morning, work resumed under strict protocol. Full daylight. Additional staff. Medical checks. The grave was uncovered again. In the clear, overhead light of morning, there was only one shadow. No nausea. No vertigo. The skeleton looked exactly as it had before. Ordinary. Silent. Dead in the way bones are always dead. The team debated whether the previous evening's experience should even be recorded. Fatigue, suggestion, environmental factors, all plausible. Still, a note was added to the log. Optical irregularity observed at low-angle light. The plan was to proceed cautiously. That afternoon, just before sunset, the symptoms returned. Not all at once, but in sequence. A pressure headache. A sense of disorientation. The feeling that the pit was deeper than it had been that morning, though measurements showed no change. And then, the second shadow. Again, it appeared only as the sun crossed a specific angle. Again, it failed to align perfectly with the skeleton. Again, it behaved as though governed by rules slightly different from the physics everyone relied on. This time, the excavation was halted immediately. Within days, the site was closed entirely. Officially, the reason given was health and safety. Unstable soil. Unexplained worker illness. The development project was rerouted. The grave was left undisturbed, reburied under supervision, its location quietly removed from public records. Privately, an internal report circulated among a small group of specialists. It included witness statements, medical notes, environmental readings. Nothing conclusive. No toxins. No gas seepage. No seismic anomalies. The only consistent variable was the time of day. Sunset. As word spread quietly through academic circles, parallels were drawn to older beliefs, ones archaeology rarely acknowledges openly. In some medieval traditions, a double shadow was considered a sign of divided death. A body buried in one place, a presence lingering elsewhere. Folklore from parts of Eastern and Central Europe spoke of individuals who died unfinished, whose shadows did not agree on where the person truly ended. More intriguingly, a handful of burial customs involved orienting graves to prevent the dead from casting back. Bodies were aligned carefully so their shadows would fall into the grave at certain times of year, not outward. The belief was not that the dead would rise, but that something of them might remain misaligned if the burial was wrong. The skeleton in question showed no obvious deviation from standard practice, unless the standard practice had failed. One hypothesis, raised quietly and never published, suggested that the skeleton might represent two overlapping burials, one body removed, one left behind. But careful examination found no disturbance layers. The grave had been opened once, and only once. Another idea was more unsettling, that the shadow was not cast by the skeleton at all, that it was cast by something still occupying the grave's intended place. This would explain the vertigo, the pressure, the sense of spatial disagreement. Human perception depends on consistency, light, depth, expectation aligning. Two shadows from one source violate that consistency at a fundamental level. The brain resists it. The body reacts. The most disturbing detail, however, emerged later. One witness, a conservator who had remained silent during the initial inquiry, admitted months afterward that the second shadow had not always fallen beside the first. At one moment, just before the pit was covered the first evening, it had crossed it. Briefly, impossibly, the shadows overlapped, then separated again. I remember thinking, she said later, that one of them didn't belong to the bones. The skeleton remains buried. No marker identifies the grave. No publication analyzes the anomaly in detail. The photographs show nothing unusual. The paperwork cites procedural caution. Yet among those who were there, the memory persists. They speak of it rarely, and never lightly. Because shadows, by definition, are dependent. They are the absence shaped by presence. They cannot exist independently. And yet, at sunset, in that grave, one did. Which leaves an uncomfortable question lingering beneath the soil, unexcavated and unanswered. If a skeleton can cast two shadows, which one is actually attached to the body?
For centuries, maps have been humanity's way of asserting order over uncertainty. Rivers were traced, mountains outlined, borders negotiated in ink long before they were enforced in stone. Forests, too, were measured and tamed on parchment reduced to green textures and labeled expanses, made legible to those who might never walk beneath their canopies. Yet in one region of Europe, cartographers encountered a woodland that resisted this process so completely that it became an embarrassment to record and a danger to ignore. The forest appeared early in regional surveys, marked with the same confidence as surrounding hills and villages. It had a name, though that name changed spelling from map to map. It occupied a known stretch of land between two rivers, neither of which ever moved. And yet, from the earliest attempts to chart its interior, something went wrong. Paths did not stay where they were drawn. The first complaints were subtle. A surveyor in the late 17th century noted that a footpath he had followed the previous summer could not be found again, despite clear memory of its bends and landmarks. He assumed overgrowth or error. Another cartographer, decades later, reported that a charcoal marker placed on a beech tree had vanished within days, not fallen, not cut, simply gone. These incidents were dismissed individually, the way all anomalies are at first. It was only when maps were compared across generations that the problem became undeniable. Trails that should have intersected did not. Clearings appeared and disappeared. The forest's edges, when measured carefully, seemed to bulge or contract by small but measurable distances. Never dramatically, never enough to provoke panic, but consistently enough to undermine confidence. When corrected, the new measurements would hold for a time, then drift again. By the early 18th century, survey teams began reporting issues with their instruments. Compasses behaved erratically once inside the tree line. Needles wavered, then spun, then settled, pointing in directions that did not correspond with known magnetic variation. Outside the forest, the same compasses worked perfectly. Attempts to explain this through iron deposits failed. Geological samples showed nothing unusual. No magnetic ore, no buried structures. Nothing that could account for the behavior. More troubling still was the fate of survey markers. Wooden stakes hammered into the soil vanished overnight. Stone cairns collapsed or were scattered without signs of human interference. In one documented case, a brass benchmark embedded in rock was recovered weeks later several meters from its original position, scratched but intact. No footprints surrounded it. As the technical explanations faltered, older voices grew louder. Local folklore had always warned against the forest, though not in the dramatic way outsiders expected. There were no tales of monsters or curses in the conventional sense. Instead, the warnings were practical, almost mundane. Do not cut straight paths. Do not mark your way too carefully. And above all, do not count the trees. The last warning appeared repeatedly in oral traditions recorded by clergy and antiquarians. Children were told that counting trees would make them lose their place. Shepherds said numbers never stayed the same. Woodcutters claimed that if you counted trunks in the morning and again in the afternoon, you would come up short or long by one or two, even if you swore you stood in the same spot. Early scholars dismissed this as metaphor. Forests are dense. Perspective shifts. Human memory is unreliable. But as mapping failures mounted, the warnings took on a different tone. One 19th century cartographer, unusually meticulous, attempted a full triangulation of the forest interior. He established reference points outside the woodland and worked inward, measuring angles and distances with mathematical rigor. His notes, preserved in fragments, reveal growing frustration. "Distances close correctly," he wrote, "until they do not. Triangles that should have resolved neatly instead produced small discrepancies, fractions of degrees, centimeters of error. Individually negligible, collectively devastating. The more measurements he took, the less the data agreed with itself. He repeated the work in winter when leaves were gone and visibility improved. The discrepancies persisted. When he attempted to reconcile the data by averaging values, the resulting map bore little resemblance to reality. Paths overlapped themselves. Clearings appeared inside streams. The forest, when rendered mathematically, became impossible. The project was abandoned. By the late 19th century, official maps began treating the forest differently. Instead of detailing its interior, cartographers shaded it as a uniform mass. Trails were drawn only to the edge, then faded. Notes appeared in margins. Poorly surveyed. Unreliable interior. In one case, simply avoid. Meanwhile, those who lived near the forest adapted in ways outsiders found strange. Villagers navigated by habit rather than landmarks. They spoke of routes in terms of time and feeling rather than distance. Walk until the light thins, they would say. Turn where the ground softens. Directions were conditional, not fixed. When pressed, they explained that the forest did not like being fixed. This was not said with fear, but with resignation. The most disturbing accounts came from those who tried to impose order anyway. A forestry commission in the early 20th century attempted to inventory the woodland for timber management. Crews were instructed to count and tag trees within designated plots. The tags numbered metal discs were nailed at chest height. Within weeks, the inventory collapsed. Tags went missing. Numbers repeated themselves in non-adjacent areas. Plots overlapped when they should not have. One forester reported finding the same numbered tree on 2 different days in 2 different locations. He was reassigned shortly afterward. The official report cited human error and environmental interference. Privately, the commission halted the project. Stories circulated of travelers entering the forest with clear plans and emerging disoriented, not lost in space but in sequence. They would insist they had walked for hours when only minutes had passed, or vice versa. Watches disagreed. Journals showed entries written out of order. None of this was dramatic enough to attract widespread attention, but it was consistent. One recurring detail appeared in multiple accounts. People who attempted to track their movement too precisely, counting steps, marking turns, measuring distances, fared worse than those who wandered. The forest, it seemed, resisted being reduced to numbers. Modern technology fared no better. Aerial surveys produced contradictory images depending on altitude and angle. Satellite data showed subtle inconsistencies between passes taken days apart. GPS signals degraded unpredictably under the canopy, not failing outright, but drifting just enough to be untrustworthy. Scientists proposed explanations involving microtopography, signal multipath effects, cognitive bias. Each explanation addressed part of the phenomenon. None addressed it fully. What makes the forest uniquely unsettling is not that it confuses travelers, many forests do, but that it undermines record-keeping itself. Maps are not just navigational tools. They are assertions of permanence. To map something is to say it exists in a stable relationship with the world. This forest refuses that assertion. Folklore suggests a reason, though it is never stated directly. In the oldest versions of the warnings, the forest is not described as dangerous or malicious. It is described as older than boundaries, older than counting. One tale speaks of the forest as a place that keeps its own measure. Another says it remembers when numbers were not needed. In that context, the shifting paths and vanishing markers take on a different meaning. They are not traps, but corrections. The forest does not punish intrusion. It simply declines to cooperate with attempts to freeze it in abstraction. Those who accept its fluidity can pass through. Those who try to fix it, to pin it down with stakes and coordinates, find their work undone. Today, the forest remains on maps as a green blur. Hikers are advised to stay on established trails, though even those are updated regularly. Surveyors still debate whether a definitive map is possible. Most agree it is not worth the effort. And among locals, the old warning persists, passed down without explanation. Do not count the trees. Not because the forest will harm you, but because the moment you insist on knowing exactly how many there are, the answer will change.
The diary itself is unremarkable at first glance, leather-bound, thumb-worn, its pages yellowed by time and damp. The handwriting is neat but strained, the sort produced by someone educated enough to write well but tired enough to do it without flourish. It was discovered in the archives of a provincial European town, misfiled among agricultural records from the mid-19th century. No one knows how long it had sat there, quietly aging, before a graduate researcher opened it, expecting notes on crop yields, and instead found something far more disturbing. The first pages read like any rural journal of the era. Weather observations, mentions of livestock births and losses, notes on church attendance and local gossip. The author, believed to be a schoolmaster or minor civil clerk, writes with restraint, rarely inserting personal emotion. Names appear and disappear without drama. Life moves forward in a steady, predictable rhythm. Then, halfway through the notebook, a new subject enters the text. The boy speaks again. One entry reads, "No name is given, no description beyond that. Just the boy." At first, the author does not treat this as unusual. Children speak strange things. Rural superstition was common, and diarists often recorded odd behavior without commentary. But within a few pages, a pattern begins to form, one that the writer himself seems reluctant to acknowledge. The boy whispered a date today. The diary notes but would not say why. 2 days later, old Marta died this morning. The date whispered by the boy matches the date of Marta's burial. At first, coincidence is the obvious explanation. Rural communities dealt with death constantly. Disease, Accidents, childbirth complications, none were rare. Predicting that someone would die soon was not exactly prophetic. But the entries continue, and the coincidences pile up with unnerving precision. Each time, the boy whispers a date. Not a name, not a cause, just a day. And each time, someone dies on that day. What makes the diary especially unsettling is the author's restraint. He does not dramatize the events. He does not speculate wildly. He records, but restraint lends the account a credibility that more emotional writing would lack. When fear does appear, it does so obliquely, in clipped sentences and omissions. The boy refuses to speak aloud now, one entry notes. Only whispers. Only to certain people. Those people, it turns out, are the dying or those soon to be buried. The diarist begins listing the dates separately in the margins, as if trying to impose order on what he is witnessing. April 14th, May 2nd, May 19th. Each date is followed days later by a corresponding death, not always from illness. One man falls from a ladder. A child drowns in a shallow stream. A woman succumbs to complications after childbirth. The boy does not distinguish between them. What is especially chilling is that the dates always correspond to burial days, not death itself. In the 19th century, burials often occurred several days after death, depending on whether distance to clergy or preparation of the body. The boy never predicts the moment of death, only the moment when the body will be placed in the ground. That detail troubles the diarist deeply. He does not speak of dying, one entry reads. He speaks of being buried. Attempts are made to question the child. The diarist records these efforts with growing frustration. The boy, estimated to be no older than 8, does not explain himself. He does not claim to see visions or hear voices. He only says that the dates come to him, and that speaking them aloud hurts. He covers his ears after whispering. The diary notes, as if the sound lingers, word spreads, as it always does in small communities. Some parents forbid their children from playing with him. Others seek him out, desperate for reassurance or warning. The diarist records one especially grim episode in which a woman begs the boy to tell her whether her sick husband will recover. The boy refuses. He cried. The entry says, he said dates are not for asking. Still, the whispers continue, the deaths continue, and gradually the scope of the predictions widens. At first, the boy whispers dates close at hand, 2 or 3 days away. Later entries show dates weeks in advance. The diarist begins marking them with dread, waiting to see who will match them. Sometimes the connection is obvious. Other times the village waits uneasily until the date arrives, fearing who it might claim. The boy himself begins to change. He eats little, one entry notes. He sleeps poorly. He wakes shouting numbers. The diarist describes the child standing in the churchyard at odd hours, staring at the graves, not touching them, not counting them, simply standing, as if listening. Medical explanations are briefly considered. The village doctor examines the boy and finds nothing physically wrong. No fever, no delirium, no signs of epilepsy or madness, as it was then understood. The doctor advises rest and prayer. The priest is less certain. The diary records a private conversation between the diarist and the local clergyman, though the details are sparse. Only one sentence stands out. The priest said some knowledge does not come from God but passes through the same doors. After that conversation, the diary entries grow shorter. The diarist stops recording daily life. The weather disappears from the pages. So do the crops. Almost every entry now revolves around the boy and the dates. One entry is particularly stark. He whispered my mother's burial day. There is no elaboration, no emotional outpouring, just the fact, written plainly. Several pages later, the burial occurs on the exact date spoken. From that point on, the diarist's tone shifts. Fear becomes more visible, though still restrained. He begins questioning the morality of writing the dates down at all. If I record them, one entry asks, do I make them real? He considers destroying the diary. He does not. Instead, he begins tracking something new. The boy silences. At irregular intervals, the boy stops whispering altogether. During these periods, no deaths occur in the village, not even expected ones. The diarist notes this with astonishment, then dread. When he is quiet, one entry reads, we are spared. The implication is clear and horrifying. Eventually, the silences grow longer. Weeks pass without whispers. The village relaxes cautiously at first, then openly. Some believe the curse, if that is what it was, has ended. Others believe the boy has simply exhausted himself. Then, one morning, the diarist records a final whisper. He spoke a date I did not write down. The next entry is the last full paragraph in the diary. It was today. There is no name attached, no explanation of who died, no mention of a funeral, just the date. Below it, written in a different hand, more hurried, less controlled, are the final words. He finally stopped talking. There are no further entries. No indication of what became of the boy. No confirmation of his death. No record of burial. What makes the diary uniquely unsettling is not the suggestion of prophecy, but the framing of it. The boy does not predict death as an event. He predicts burial as a certainty, as if the outcome has already passed into a category beyond change. The diarist never suggests that the dates could be altered, avoided, or resisted. Even the periods of silence feel temporary. like pauses rather than endings. Modern historians who have examined the diary are divided. Some argue that the dates were retroactively interpreted, that the diarist may have shaped the narrative after the fact. Others point out inconsistencies in burial practices that could account for apparent accuracy. Yet no one has been able to explain the final entry. If the boy stopped talking because he died, why is there no burial date recorded for him? And if he stopped talking because the dates stopped coming, what does that say about what he had been hearing all along? The diary ends without answers. No closure, just a silence that feels intentional. As if, at last, the boy took the one date he had never whispered and kept it to himself.
Beneath one of Europe's oldest cities, its name still debated by historians who prefer discretion over sensationalism, there runs a second city made of stone, shadow, and silence. Tunnels carved by Roman engineers intersect with medieval cellars. Plague pits lie beneath Renaissance foundations. Layers of history stack downward like pages pressed into the earth. It was in this buried world, during a routine infrastructure project, that workers uncovered something no map, record, or legend had prepared them for. They found a bell, not fragments. Not a cracked remnant or decorative piece. A complete bell, intact and upright, sealed inside a carefully constructed stone chamber far below street level. It was not attached to a tower. There were no ropes, no supports, no mechanism to ring it. The bell simply stood there, as if waiting. What followed unsettled not only archaeologists, but the entire city above. The discovery occurred during excavation for a new utility tunnel. The crew expected soil, debris, perhaps an old wall. Instead, their drills struck dressed stone-smooth blocks fitted with precision uncommon for underground construction. When a section was removed, it revealed a small vaulted chamber no larger than a chapel apse. At its center stood the bell, resting on a low stone base. It was immediately clear that this was not scrap metal repurposed or accidentally buried. The chamber had been built specifically to contain the bell. Its walls bore no ornamentation, no inscriptions, no religious symbols. No soot from candles, no offerings. Nothing that explained why this space existed. The bell itself was large, nearly 2 meters tall, and cast from a bronze alloy that initial analysis suggested was inconsistent with known formulas from the region. Its surface was smooth but not polished, bearing faint concentric lines from the casting process. There were no saints' names, no dates, no foundry marks, no crosses, no coats of arms. It was, in every way that mattered to historians, anonymous. City archives were searched immediately. Church inventories from every century were examined. Bells were among the most meticulously documented objects in European cities. They were expensive, symbolic, and politically significant. Bells marked time, summoned worship, warned of invasion, announced executions, celebrated coronations. Their casting and installation were public events. Yet no record ecclesiastical or civic mentioned a bell buried underground. Theories proliferated quickly. Some suggested it was hidden during wartime, buried to prevent looting or seizure. But bells hidden in such circumstances were typically broken up, melted down, or stored temporarily. They were not sealed inside custom-built stone chambers. Others proposed a failed casting discarded below ground. Metallurgical testing ruled that out. The bell had been tuned. Its thickness varied subtly in ways that suggested careful acoustic planning. This bell had been meant to ring. Against protocol, the accident happened. While documenting the chamber, one of the workers struck the bell lightly with a metal tool. Accounts differ on whether it was intentional curiosity or an inadvertent tap. What is consistent is the description of the sound. It was not loud. It did not echo dramatically through the tunnel. It produced a low, sustained tone that seemed to settle rather than travel. Those present described an odd physical sensation, a pressure in the chest, a fleeting dizziness. The sound faded quickly. The incident was logged and dismissed. Within days, the first reports began. Residents living several blocks away complained of vivid dreams involving sound. Not noise, not music, but a single resonant tone that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Some described it as comforting, others as oppressive. A few said it woke them repeatedly at the same hour each night, though clocks showed no consistency. The reports were dismissed as coincidence. Cities produce rumors as naturally as they produce heat. But the complaints continued, spreading outward in an uneven radius from the excavation site. Sleep clinics noted an unusual cluster of patients reporting auditory dreams with no external stimulus. Psychologists were consulted. Stress, suggestion, urban anxiety, these explanations were offered and accepted publicly. Privately, the archaeologists were uneasy. When the bell was examined more closely, additional anomalies emerged. Its interior bore no clapper. There was no evidence one had ever been attached. The bell had not been designed to be rung in the conventional way. Its base was solid. Its crown lacked the usual loop or yoke fitting. If it had been meant to produce sound, it would have required a method unknown to standard bell-making traditions. Acoustic specialists were brought in. When they measured the bell's resonant properties, they discovered that its primary frequency fell below the range of most environmental noise, bordering on infrasound. Such frequencies are known to affect human perception and emotion, inducing unease, vivid imagery, and in some cases, auditory hallucinations. That alone might have explained the dreams, except for one detail. The bell was no longer being struck. After the initial incident, access to the chamber was restricted. No one touched the bell again. No vibrations were recorded. Seismographs showed nothing unusual. And yet, the dreams persisted. More troubling still, some residents reported hearing the bell while awake not as sound, but as a sensation. A feeling of pressure accompanied by certainty. They could not describe the tone, only the knowledge that it was ringing. Historical parallels were sought. Scholars scoured records for references to underground bells, ritual sound devices, or buried acoustic instruments. A few obscure texts surfaced. Medieval chronicles spoke vaguely of warning bells that do not call the ear, but the soul. Monastic writings hinted at sounds used not to summon congregations, but to mark thresholds between prayer and silence, life and death, time and eternity. None of these sources provided evidence, only metaphors. One theory suggested that the bell was never meant to be heard by the living at all. Some funerary traditions, especially those influenced by pre-Christian beliefs, held that sound could guide the dead or mark the boundary between worlds. Bells rung at funerals were thought to confuse malevolent spirits or help souls find their way. An underground bell, sealed away, might have been intended as a permanent signal, an anchor in the unseen. But why hide it? And why erase all mention of it? Another hypothesis proposed that the bell was a form of civic control. Bells regulated medieval life. They dictated when people woke, worked, prayed, and slept. An underground bell, inaudible but perceptible, might have been an experiment in influence, an attempt to affect populations subtly without overt command. That idea was quickly dismissed as anachronistic, and yet the bell remained. As weeks passed, the dreams began to change. Initially, people described only sound. Later, they described space as vast, hollow chambers, stone corridors, descending stairs, always accompanied by the sense of a distant ringing. A few residents began sketching what they saw. The drawings, collected independently, showed remarkable similarities. They resembled the chamber beneath the city. Authorities eventually ordered the excavation sealed. The bell was left in place. Official statements emphasized safety concerns and lack of cultural significance. The tunnel was rerouted. The site was closed. The dreams faded gradually, though some residents claimed they never stopped entirely. Even years later, a handful of people insist they still feel the bell at night, not ringing exactly, but listening. The bell remains underground, inaccessible, and undocumented. No museum claims it. No plaque marks its location. Tour guides avoid mentioning it. It has been, in effect, buried twice, once by its creators and once by history. Whether the bell was meant to warn, to guide, to control, or to communicate something we no longer understand is impossible to say. What is certain is that it was placed deliberately, hidden carefully, and erased from record with intent. And when it was disturbed, just once, it reminded the city that some instruments are not meant to be heard with the ears alone. Some are meant to resonate elsewhere.
For more than 200 years, the village existed on paper as reliably as it existed on the land. It appeared in tax rolls, land grants, church tithes, and regional surveys. Never large, never wealthy, but consistent. A modest settlement, counted and recounted by administrators who rarely bothered to note anything beyond numbers owed and acres tilled. Generation after generation lived, paid, married, and died there. And then, in a single year, the village stopped appearing altogether. There was no marginal note explaining why. No record of destruction. No reference to famine relief or military conscription. One year the village paid its taxes. The next year, the legispace where its name should have been was simply blank. At first, historians assumed clerical error. It happened often enough. Borders shifted. Names changed spelling. Villages were absorbed into neighbors. But this disappearance was too clean. The surrounding settlements remained, their boundaries unchanged. The missing village had not been renamed or merged. It had not been reassigned to another jurisdiction. It was simply gone. That mystery might have remained an archival footnote if not for a survey conducted centuries later, when modern archaeologists began mapping abandoned rural sites in the region. Satellite imagery revealed faint geometric patterns beneath layers of soil and vegetation, straight lines where no modern roads ran, rectangular shadows suggesting foundations. When the team cross-referenced the coordinates with historical maps, the impossible connection emerged. They were standing on the land of the vanished village. What they found there unsettled them far more than an empty ledger ever could. The village was intact. Not ruined, not burned, not reclaimed by forest in the chaotic way abandoned places usually are. Houses stood where they had been built, walls upright, roofs collapsed inward rather than torn away. Doors hung open or rested against thresholds, as if left unlatched in a hurry, or with deliberate indifference. Hearths were cold, but blackened with soot from years of use. Cooking pots sat where they had last been set down. A loom remained threaded. Tools lay neatly stacked against walls. In one house, a wooden spoon rested inside a cracked bowl, as though someone had paused mid-meal and never returned. There were no signs of violence. No weapons scattered, no defensive barricades, no burned layers in the soil. The village had not been sacked or evacuated under attack. It had been left. And not hastily, either. Valuables were missing, but not in the way looting leaves gaps. Jewelry boxes were empty, yet still closed. Chests remained, but their contents, coins, heirlooms, documents, had been carefully removed. Clothing hung on pegs, but travel cloaks and boots were gone. This was not flight in panic. It was preparation. As excavation continued, the researchers turned to the cemetery at the edge of the settlement. Here, too, the layout matched expectations. Rows of graves aligned according to local custom, headstones of stone and wood, markers indicating centuries of burials. But when they began recording inscriptions, a chilling pattern emerged. The stones were blank, not weathered beyond legibility, not broken or defaced. The surfaces were smooth, deliberately scraped clean. Where names, dates, prayers, and symbols should have been, there was nothing. Even newer graves, those that, based on stratigraphy, should have been only decades old at the time of abandonment, had been stripped of identity. In some cases, faint tool marks were still visible, as if someone had worked carefully to remove each letter without damaging the stone itself. Wooden markers showed similar treatment, their carved names shaved away. The dead had not been disturbed. Only their names had been taken. This was not the work of vandals. Vandals destroy. This was meticulous, patient, almost reverent. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became that the village had not merely been abandoned. It had been erased. Inside the church, or what passed for one, records should have offered clarity. Parish registers, baptismal lists, marriage contracts. These were the backbone of medieval and early modern bureaucracy. Yet the shelves were bare. Not collapsed or rotted, but empty. Wax seals were found on the floor, broken cleanly, as if documents had been unrolled, read one final time, and then removed. Even the altar cloth was folded, not left strewn. Someone had planned this. The question was why. The usual explanations for disappearance, war, plague, environmental disaster, left unmistakable signatures. Plague pits, mass graves, hurried burials. None were present. Drought leaves signs in pollen records and crop remains. Floods scatter debris. Earthquakes crack foundations. Here, the soil layers were calm, uninterrupted. Life had gone on normally until the very end. Even stranger, surrounding villages recorded nothing unusual. No influx of refugees. No sudden population spike. No mention of an entire community arriving together. If the villagers had relocated, they had done so invisibly, or in fragments small enough to escape notice. One theory proposed that the village had been subject to a legal erasure. In certain periods, communities could be dissolved by decree, their land reassigned, their records confiscated. But even in those cases, people did not vanish. Names remained in court cases, in debt ledgers, in neighboring parish books. Here, the names ended everywhere at once. Another theory suggested religious or cultural self-dissolution, a collective decision to abandon an identity perceived as cursed, sinful, or dangerous. History offers rare but real examples of groups who attempted to start over entirely, shedding names, histories, even family ties. But those groups usually announced themselves loudly. They left manifestos, letters, testimonies. Silence was not their hallmark. This village left nothing of the sort. Instead, what they left behind was absence, crafted absence, intentional and complete. Archaeologists began to notice subtler signs of coordination. All houses appeared to have been vacated within the same narrow time window. There were no signs of long-term decline. No homes falling into disrepair earlier than others. No half-empty structures. The abandonment had been synchronized. Children's toys were gone, but cradles remained. Livestock pens were empty, gates left open. Fields showed evidence of one last harvest, but no planting afterward. Whatever decision had been made, it had been shared by everyone, including the dead. Removing names from graves served no practical purpose. It did not protect property or prevent taxation. It did not ease travel or resettlement. It only erased memory. To scrape away a name is to deny future generations the ability to say, "This person was here." Why would a community choose oblivion? Some researchers believe the answer lies in fear, not of external threats, but of recognition itself. In certain historical contexts, to be named was to be vulnerable. Names tied people to obligations, accusations, heresies, blood feuds, collective punishments. Entire villages could be held responsible for the actions of a few. To disappear as individuals might not have been enough. The village may have believed that only total erasure could guarantee safety. Others suggest something darker, a shared secret, a transgression so profound that survival required not just flight, but denial of existence. If no one could remember who they were, then whatever they had done could not follow them. There is also a quieter possibility, one that unsettles historians most. Perhaps the villagers were not fleeing danger at all. Perhaps they were pursuing something, an idea, a promise, a belief, that required leaving the past behind completely. A deliberate shedding of history, not out of fear, but conviction. We will likely never know. What remains is the village itself, a place frozen not in catastrophe, but in choice. Unlike Pompeii, caught mid-breath by disaster, this settlement paused, exhaled, and stepped away. It denied the future its stories, its names, its lineage. In doing so, it achieved something rare. Most human communities are remembered through fragments, ruins, records, second-hand accounts. This one engineered its own forgetting. It exists only as a question mark, a negative space in history where certainty dissolves. The village erased itself so thoroughly that even now, centuries later, we can walk its streets and know almost nothing about the people who built them. And perhaps that was the point.